Hello, welcome to another episode of History Hack. We have a returning guest, a very exciting returning guest. Alex, who have we got?
We have someone who keeps coming back because basically he does our job for us. All those little intricate bits of history and places that we utterly fail to cover. He contacts us and goes, "Do you want that?" And we're like, "Oh, hell yes, we do." It's Josh from HistoryLand, Josh Provan. Josh, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I've just emerged from my random cupboard of places that History Hack would be interested in seeing.
It's brilliant. So you've already done, we did Hawaii, we butchered Polynesian history, didn't we?
Yes, lots of fun.
Yeah, and the cartoon was epic. And then you've done, we have another one coming out very, very soon, which is about a unknown kind of pharaoh. And then you originally did Japan. But so tell us, where are you taking us today, Josh?
Today, we say in our best CBBC presenter voice, we are going... We're going to explore South American history.
Boom! Yay! Because we don't have nearly enough of this. And the one we did on the Mosquito Coast actually went down really well. So whereabouts in South America are we going and why?
Well, it's quite a broad geographical scope, actually. Specifically speaking, the subject in question was born in Ecuador, but because of the nature of the time she lived in, the South American Wars of Independence, Latin American Wars of Independence, whatever you want to call them, Wars of Liberation, you know, stuff like that. It's all very long-winded if it's not in Spanish. She ranged from Ecuador down to Peru to Colombia. You know, she went all over the place.
Did she do Bolivia as well?
I think she might have.
Yeah, because I noticed, so we went to Lake Titicaca and they basically sit on either side of the lake, the Peruvians and the Bolivians looking at each other going, yeah, this lake is technically more ours than it is yours, and like giving each other side eye.
Yeah, I'm sure she absolutely did a bit of trash talking with people about who owned Lake Titicaca.
Yeah. Anyway, so what do we know about Manuela Saenz, her early life?
Well, the thing about the most famous people in the South American Wars of Independence is that they are absolute 100%, you know, certified legends. And that comes with many different backstories. Mm-hmm. Manuela being ever so slightly second player to some of the bigger characters, has slightly more variation in her background than some of the others, but we know that she came from Quito in Ecuador, which is kind of a rural city in the middle of nowhere as far as everybody else listening is concerned. She was born illegitimately to a Spanish nobleman / rake and a criolla spinster who was his mistress. The word criolla is just Spanish for Creole, which means you were of Spanish descent, but you were born in the Americas. And so, you know, she's actually born in secret because of this, because her family her mother's family was relatively respectable. They were embarrassed about the fact that the daughter got knocked up. So she got born in secret, and then her mother tried to get her kind of a place to have a decent living in, but didn't manage too successfully to do that. And then she ended up in a convent, and then she ended up being seduced by an army officer and running away with him, and she got kicked out of the convent. Then her mother died, and her father seemed to do the decent thing and took her in and gave her all the necessary things to make her or to try to make her a respectable lady in society.
So she gets married in 1817. My gosh, I can't do dates anymore. How was married life for her?
Married life was theoretically good. She got married to one of her dad's friends, who was an English merchant named James Thorne. And he was rich, he was relatively affable, he was about 20 years older than her, of course. which some might see as a drawback. But the fact that that he didn't care whether she was illegitimate or not, that he didn't have any problem with providing her a comfortable living, and would naturally offer her a certain amount of stability after a rather confusing early start to life, was probably quite attractive to her. So she didn't seem to put up any complaint about it. She married him, and they lived in Quito for a while. But it soon became obvious that she enjoyed being a hostess, and she became one of the most prominent hostesses in the city. And we find out that Mr. Thorne, or Dr. Thorne, I should say, if I'm remembering correctly, was a rather jealous chap. You're a bit of an older chap, but relatively speaking, and you have a beautiful young wife who really likes partying. It's going to be a bit concerning to you. And so he decides to pack up and go to Lima, which is the capital of Peru. Why he did this is curious, because if it was out of jealousy, going to a bigger city with a more active social life doesn't seem like a very sensible thing to me. Yeah, but yeah,
you're going to take her where there are more young men.
Yeah. So then they packed off to Lima, and pretty much, as I suspect, the same thing happened again. She became very popular as a hostess, and she went around with a lot of famous and infamous people. And she started to, she already kind of disliked property people and Spaniards because of the whole, affair with the Spanish officer, and the fact that she was illegitimate and couldn't get her inheritance for a while. And so she started to fall in with this kind of the rowdy set, artists and liberals and famous courtesans and things like that, and really got a taste for scandal and enjoying it.
She sounds like a dude. I love her.
Yeah, she's pretty epic.
Yeah,
I knew you would.
Life in early 19th century. I mean, Lima's an epic city. It's brilliant. Apart from the traffic, it's beautiful as well. But yeah, I'd be rocking it and having a good time as well. I mean, what else is there to do in the early 1800s other than the Inca Trail?
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, actually, the other thing there is to do there is to become a revolutionary if you're in the 1820s.
Yes. Yeah. So, do you think she began to have anti-royalist sentiments, and why?
Well, like I said before, she wasn't a fan of the Spanish because of the bad experiences when she was a teenager, I guess. She kind of started, I think that allowed her to sort of grow a more developed antagonism towards the ruling sort of state. And obviously that means the Spanish monarchy and the Spanish government in Peru. It would have been around 1820, I think, 1821, when the wars of independence had already begun in other countries in South America, such as Venezuela and Colombia. Well, what is now Colombia, I should say. But the slip into becoming, from being a popular society, lost my words, a popular socialite and a outright revolutionary seems to have happened around this time when the Argentinian forces under General San Martin invaded Peru, or started to invade Peru, and the Spanish started to come under attack in the country from Republican forces, and she was just suited to it. Already she was like wanting adventure. She had a very boring husband, and a very boring and jealous husband, and she was already seeking things that were exciting to do, whether that was scandalizing people or just having a lot of fun and not really caring what the consequences were. And the fact that she already didn't really like the the ruling power and thought it was old-fashioned and repressive. She was just made to be a revolutionary at this time, and so she became a recruiter and a spy and an active member of the Republican movement in Lima. And she seems to have been. I haven't seen a great deal of details. I don't have one standout story or anything like that about what she did once she was there. But I think she did all of these things because she was quite well connected. And she seemed to do rather well, because when San Martin took Lima in, it would have been around 1821, 1822, I think, he gave her a medal. She met him. She was actually very impressed by him. He was much too shy to do anything about it because he was kind of a shy chap. But he gave her the medal. He gave her the Order of the Sun. And if you see some of her paintings, you can see her wearing the ribbon and the star that was given to patriots who had done good work at this stage of the revolution.
Tell us about the insurrection in Peru in 1820, and what was Manuela doing at the time?
Peru was actually one of the royalist strongholds in South America. It was not just a sort of a client state or dependency. It was the viceroyalty of Peru. It was one of the main centers of Spanish power in the Americas. So it was a tough nut to crack. And unlike in Venezuela, where the revolution began with popular uprising started by our boy Simón Bolívar and Francisco de Miranda, which were popular in nature, Peru required an exterior nudge and a lot of help to get going. And so when successful rebellions were staged in Venezuela and states like Grand Colombia were formed and things like that, and in Argentina, way down south, the leaders of the revolution in those countries looked around at Spanish power and realized Peru is the place we have to take out if we're going to get the Spanish out of South America. And so they all made a beeline for it. And it was quite a long and involved war, because it lasted from 1822 to 1824, and there had to be like 2 invasions to get it done, because the royalists were resurgent at some point or another, always resurgent at one point or another. And so this is how you get the Argentinian army coming in up from the south, under the formidable soldier General San Martin, and the northern army coming down, both I believe through various treacherous paths through the Andes, under the dynamic and heroic Libertador Simón Bolívar. Manuela, like I say, she was a recruiter, she was a courier, she did the things that you do if you are well connected in cities and you want to be part of a revolutionary movement. You pass information, you say, hey, do you want to be part of the revolution? And you organize things. And this must have been somewhat awkward because her father was obviously Spanish and a royalist, but she didn't care. And so she did. At the time when it broke out, she would have been already, I think, well in with with patriot circles, and was able to use her connections effectively to undermine and help communications to defeat the Spanish. And when Lima fell the first time, obviously she became a war hero essentially, and she got a medal and she went back, but she had to go back to Quito actually very soon afterwards, because remember her husband, Dr. Thorne, the jealous guy with the poor judgment. Well, he was friends with her father, and her father was in a pretty dodgy position now that the Patriots were winning over in Quito, and he wanted to go back there and help him out because he had the money and he'd probably buy a boat and get him out of the country if necessary. And so she went back there, and that is where she met in 1822. That was where she met Simon Bolivar at the Victory Ball.
Simon Bolivar. This is where he comes into the story. Tell us who he is. This name I know, despite my tragic knowledge of Peruvian history. Can I just share my favourite bit of Peruvian history, though?
Please do.
If you go to Cuzco and the cathedral, they have the South American version of the Last Supper, and it's pretty standard, apart from the fact that Judas's face is the face of the Spaniard that conquered Peru in the first place, and the dinner is a guinea pig, which is a delicacy. Well, not a delicacy, but a food source in Peru. I was talking to a girl in Cuzco town centre who said that her mum just had a guinea pig run out the back, and when they wanted to eat one, they went out, killed one, and fried it or whatever, and ate it. I couldn't bring myself to do it, though. I couldn't eat a guinea pig.
Yeah, I would feel weird doing it. I mean, if one's put in front of you, I think I'm probably too polite not to try it, but it's like...
No, yeah. I love it. This is like this is the Maasai Mara do this as well. If someone, the Maasai do this as well. If you offer them something, it's considered heinous to say no. So it's really funny to give your Maasai safari driver gin to see what happens when he tries it for the first time. I miss him. Dee's awesome. If you go to the Mara, get Dee as your tour guide. Anyway, we've digressed as usual on History Hack. People know the name Simon Bolivar, but tell us who he is, because I know the name, but I don't know anything about him, and I suspect that's going to be the case for a few people.
Simon Bolivar is he's almost deified in certain parts of South America. He's known as the Libertador, the Liberator. And because he's credited with liberating most of South America. He came from, he was born in Venezuela, in Caracas, I believe, and he was a rather diffident aristocrat, criollo, to begin with, not really interested in anything much, very rich. And eventually found his way to travel because he was just useless to all of his family. They sent him to Spain to have a holiday, really, and try and find something to do. And so he went to Spain, and he fell in love, and he came back and he got permission to marry the girl he loved, and he came back to Venezuela with her.
I bet that's not what his family were planning when they sent him there.
No, I think they were hoping for great things, but instead he just hung around like the great courts of Europe and made a lot of friends and got married and came back to kind of just live the life of Riley, really. Unfortunately, tragedy struck because his wife died, and he really truly loved her, and it broke his heart, and it sent him flying off into various directions, trying to find something to do. And the revolution, and you lose the love of your life, overthrowing one of the most powerful governments in Europe seems like something that should be done. The world is upside down, so why not just continue?
Mess with it some more,
yeah. Yeah. So that was his start. It did not go well. He didn't just win everything at the drop of a hat. He failed the first time, and he failed the second time, and then on the third time, he actually got some by this, and he got the Spanish on the run. This guy, with practically no military training to speak of, managed to become a very successful general and a very successful leader of patriot forces. He had the gift of speech, and that's what a revolutionary needs. His letters are very famous for their rallying cries. He's quoted quite a lot in in sort of patriotic kind of literature, and his appeals and grand dreams for a one united South America are very admirable, and his idea to try and make everything equal where things were not equal, like wanting to abolish slavery and trying to make, provision for the poor and allowing people of any kind of race then currently in South America to be able to get along in the world, were some of his core principles, which sadly fell by the wayside as he went on and troubles came against him. He was a very complicated guy, but a very interesting guy. I said to someone yesterday that at his best, everybody would want to be Simon Bolivar. Mm-hmm. But at his worst, he was a very flawed person.
Aren't many of the great people?
Yes,
I'm thinking of Grandad. I'm thinking of Churchill. Could be a right bugger.
Indeed. And Bolivar.
I love now that it's Grandad. I think it just.
I'm just going to embrace it. I'm going to embrace the crazes, Grandad.
Oh right.
Yeah,
that's your last name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, Josh, can I just say, how long is it taking you to realise that?
Yeah, I don't. The problem is I don't live in the 30s, so I don't refer to people by their last names.
Yeah. But George V thought he a right bugger is exactly what George V would have described Churchill as. Because yes, a brilliant man, but a complete pain in the arse half the time to get there. Absolutely. And it's true of all of them. I mean, Lloyd George for me is 90% pain in the arse.
Yeah, absolutely. And Simon Bolivar was absolutely this. He was just so classical. It's so typical of the great man of history that he has these great qualities. But if you actually knew him, unless you believed in him, then he's just the worst guy in the world. Especially, and this just grew and grew and grew as he got as his life went on, and adversity started to sort of chip away at the gilded image that was created at first. I mean, it was celebrated across the world as this kind of shining hero kind of guy. But yeah, people who had to work with him saw things differently.
Well, how does he hook up with? Is it a real hookup? With Manuela?
Well,
or is it a professional hookup?
Can you explain what you mean by that?
I was about to say, what is a professional hookup?
As in not bedroom antics. I didn't want to just imply that she jumped into bed with him. Okay. Does she?
Okay, yeah, she goes to the bedroom.
Yeah, I guess it's Simon Bolivar.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So it's a hookup.
Yeah,
it is a hookup.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely. I have the feeling that she might have tried to take up with General San Martin if he wasn't such a shy guy.
I get the feeling she'd eat a shy guy alive.
Yeah, you had to be a Simon Bolivar to.
It would be like an Alina and Zach.
Sorry, whoa! Where is this coming from?
From the immortal quote that you drunkenly gave once, which was, "I'd destroy him."
Why do you keep bringing this?
Because it's brilliant. And because of the 1,000-yard stare he gets in his eye when we remind him about it.
The images are not weird at the second for people.
No.
The image of this couple is fascinating, but weird. Yeah. Yes, it was a hookup. To put a snappy name to it, it was definitely a hookup. She, remember, had no particular luck with finding anybody who to care for or love or be attracted to that was kind of in her league, we'll say. Not in terms of physical attractiveness, but in terms of someone who excited her and interested her.
Yeah.
Not since the Spanish douche who got her kicked out of the convent and then abandoned her.
Swine.
Yeah, and obviously that was a pattern she saw from her father as well, who pretty much left her mother to be cared for by her family until she died, and then he kind of stepped up. But yeah, as I said, Simon Bolivar at this point, he's a hero. He is a gallant, heroic figure, a romantic figure, and one who she probably knew full well had no trouble starting affairs, even if they meant absolutely nothing to him. Well, Manuela decided that, well, being Manuela, being the kind of woman she was, probably, I'm going to say she probably said, well, he's not going to forget me. And he didn't. He was entranced by her and utterly captivated him. And she utterly captivated him. You know, and she got her hero, basically. She got someone to believe in. She got someone she could defend. She got someone she could get on board with, basically. And this started a very one of the most famous love affair of Simon Bolivar's life. She is best known as his most beloved mistress. And it all started this very romantically at this ball in Quito, where he first saw her, and she decided, this is the guy. And I don't care if I'm married. I don't care if people start making fun of me. I don't mind being the mistress because I see what I want, and I'm going to go get it.
I love that she is basically, as someone with an immense amount of daddy issues, she's taken it to a whole new level, isn't she? My dad was Spanish. He screwed me. Revenge now. Yeah.
Yeah, that does seem to sum up. That does seem to be quite a lot of sense to that character motivation there.
Yeah, but not to belittle her achievements.
No.
Because she is a force of nature, isn't she?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, but that makes a lot of sense. I think that's right. I think that fits pretty well with certainly. I don't think you get a lot of psychological analysis as to her motives. Her story that I've read so far is always usually, certainly in English, I don't think there are many books about her. In Spanish, I think there are, but as a result, you don't get a lot of sort of biographical, psychological insight into her motivations. So generally, you see her through the biographies of Bolivar or the histories of the Spanish Wars, the South American Wars of Independence. So that seems like a valid idea, to be honest. You know, my dad ruined my mother's life. He was Spanish. My first love abandoned me. He was Spanish. So I'm just going to
destroy their empire.
Yeah, I'm going to twist the knife. It's like Bolivar seeking for meaning. He didn't particularly have a fondness for the Spanish after spending time in Spain. And when his wife died, he decided, well, I'm just going to overthrow the empire because I have nothing left to live for. So
how does this power couple work? So he's off doing the fighty thing on the battlefield. What does she do?
Well, this is interesting, isn't it?
It really is. It's just great the way they had to hook up. If they didn't, it would just not be a good story. It would be like season 8 of Game of Thrones. It would just be like, what? This is what should be happening, and it's not, and I'm angry. So how does it work, this power couple?
Well, unlike some of his other affairs, and obviously she would not be his last mistress, but she would be his greatest mistress, and the one he actually cared deeply about. But he was like I say, he was a complicated fellow and quite confused in terms of his personal life. And remember, he never got over his first wife either. So there are these challenges, but nevertheless, he's trying to run a revolution. It's not an easy revolution to do. It's not like the one that the North Americans fought. It's much more complicated and fought over a much wider continent. Almost the entire continent, actually.
And it's a complicated continent as well, isn't it? Like terrain-wise, and that it trumps America.
Oh yeah, and when we say America, you know, in terms of the American Revolution, we're talking about the 13 colonies and a bit of Canada.
Yeah.
not the entire continent to the Rockies or anything like that. And that is what we're dealing with here. This is from the Caribbean Sea to southern Peru and Argentina.
Yeah. I mean, to get to Lima, you've got to cross a bloody big mountain range, and then it's just perched on the coast, isn't it? So it's not easy to get to.
No, it's not easy to get to. It is an awful place to fight a war.
Yeah.
Basically. But yeah, the power couple set against this was pretty much that she would go wherever he was, if he would let her. And he would often try and keep her a little distant now and again, until he just grew to miss her too much and then said, "Do please come." And, well, he would say it in much more romantic terms like that. The letters to each other, the ones that survive, are full of, like romantic, flowery phrases and...
so he was good at the flannel.
Oh, yes, he was good at the flannel. Cool. And he had the gift of gab, remember. He could probably persuade her to try, and you could probably persuade her to just, if you stay here, I'm going to go and fight a little, and then I'll send for you and stuff like that.
Not to trivialize, but if you've got the gift of the gab to the extent that you can overthrow the Spanish Empire on a whole continent, then if you're not using it to get laid as well, then you're missing a trick, aren't you?
You are, yeah, and he did. He definitely was able to use that to his advantage.
I'm guessing she was as well, though.
Well, yes. I mean, I don't know if she wasn't as eloquent as Bolivar was. She used to get mocked because she had a Quito accent, so she wasn't as refined as some ladies, I suppose, in Lima and things like that.
The extent of my girl crush on her now is that I like to think she just shot those people.
Well, we'll get to her sort of. I suppose we'll get to her response to people who took objection to her. Yeah, it's not too far from the mark. Basically, she would go wherever he went, though. Inevitably, even if she couldn't go immediately with him, whenever he settled in a city after going on campaign and stuff, she would always go to him and live and rent or buy a house right next door to wherever his house was, and then openly live with him wherever he happened to go in that place. There's even stories that she actually went on campaign with the army in, I think, 1824. But I haven't really been able to substantiate whether that's just part of the legend or not. I know that she persuaded him at one point to make her an officer, practically. And he made her a captain and then a colonel, I believe. And she loved dressing up in her hussar's uniform to shock people. And I believe she even painted a moustache on once or twice. But I know he definitely gave her control of his personal archives, and she took that duty very seriously. And so she actually had a proper staff appointment with the army, theoretically speaking. And so that was another way that she could make it work, because it was her job to take the archives to him whenever he got kind of camped out in a particular place. And so, I mean, there was one point, I think, when I think she had to go to Lima or Bogota, one of the two, and she took 5 people, his archives, crossed the Andes and crocodile-infested rivers to get his papers to him. And then, of course, shacked up. But this was how it worked. Basically, she decided that we're together now, and that means I'm going to go wherever you're going to go.
That time period, though, that's quite far advanced for women to be able to say, okay, you're going, I'm coming with you.
Yes, I get the impression that, like you were saying before, about her persuasiveness.
Mm.
You get the impression from the things that people wrote about her that she was very difficult to say no to, despite the gift of gab that Bolivar had. And sometimes he could sort of like use his honeyed words to kind of like, you know, tell her what to do. Generally speaking, he did this in letters. In person, I think she was in charge.
Yeah, this is it, isn't it? It's like, for all of his honeyed words and his ability to control his like military world and everything, get them home and they do as they're told.
Yeah.
She wears the pants in the relationship. Sorry, trousers in the relationship.
Yeah, good for her.
Indeed.
So, well, then Bolivar, he becomes president, doesn't he?
Yeah.
What happens to Manuela at that time?
During his up and down career, he goes from like being a general, and then he's a president of the First Republic of Grand Colombia, and then he gets kicked out of it, and then he gets offered to become the president of. He gets offered to be president again, and he sets up shop in Bogota, and Manuela, obviously, as we just discussed, she traveled to be with him, and as was her wont, she got a house really close to the presidential palace, and would go up to his country house for the weekend, or however long he would stay. It was a place called La Quinta, which, funnily enough, is a really confusing thing to call for it to be called, because there is a hotel chain in America of motels, sort of better type motels, called La Quinta Inn. And so if you Google La Quinta, Bogota, you're going to come up with a bunch of hotel names, and you have to be quite specific about the search if you want to try and find this place. But it still exists. And so she went up to, this was sort of what she was doing. And by this point, also we should mention that she was a very infamous figure in terms of sort of conservative society, because she was openly living with the president of their country in Bogota, and she didn't care. She was quite, and she didn't care. She didn't care about what people thought, and she certainly didn't care about the appeals from her husband, who she did not bother to divorce, asking her to come back to him.
I love this. So the husband is still knocking around.
Yes.
By this point, he just must have been like, FML.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is actually part of the reason why Bolivar now and again had to try and keep his distance from her, whether he liked it or not, because he was an important man and he had a reputation to kind of preserve. Now, he might have had the odd casual affair, but Manuela was very different. Everybody knew that she pretty much lived with him from time to time, and was a regular sort of person on his arm, and obviously in his bedroom. So it's like I think at some point pressure from Dr. Thorne sort of impelled Bolivar now and again to say, to try and keep his distance, but it never usually lasted very long. And her letter to him is savage in its honesty.
Did just say, "You are lame. I'm not coming home, Manuela."
That is, exactly. It's pretty much it. Yeah, that cuts to the heart of it. She goes on like a whole bunch of things about his English temperament and things like that, but that is pretty much it. Yeah.
I love this woman.
Yeah, she's fantastic. So she's in Bogota. She's just living her life. She's having her best life. She's having a good time. Unfortunately, things are a bit damp and miserable in Bogota at the second. Things haven't been going too well for President Bolivar. There's been some military reverses here and there. He's depressed. He has a fever. Most of the palace has a fever. There are people who don't like him very much anymore, because when you turn from victorious general to kind of statesmen. Everybody
Start
knows,
telling them what to do.
Yeah, everybody knows that you stop being a hero and start being the guy everybody hates. So, there are a lot of people who aren't exactly pleased with Bolivar anymore, and so he's pretty depressed. And Manuela, she has a bit of a cold too, and she's hanging out in her house one night. They don't know that things are actually about to kick off rather dramatically. It's 1828, by the way, for anybody who's trying to keep track of our of our chronology here. But basically, a bunch of guys have got together and said, we're going to kill Simon Bolivar, and we're going to, start a new government, which is just now, I guess, the beginning of a trend in South America or something like that. I don't know. But he is blithely unaware of this. And he's just feeling sorry for himself. He's feeling sick.
I love this. So he's got man flu and is making way more of it than is necessary somewhere in a palace, is what you're saying.
Well, it does sound like that. I will plead for the benefit of the doubt, because he was an inherently poorly man. Maybe he made too much of this because he was a very dramatic soul at heart. Who knows? But whatever the case, he sent a note around to Manuela asking her to come around and take care of him. And she at first said no, because I'm not feeling well myself. But then he pleaded again, and she said, all right. And so she goes across.
Just imagine the man up and stop being a pussy that went back the first time.
Maybe so, yeah. She would probably have told him that. He's like, I'm sick. Deal with it. I'll see you tomorrow, or something like that. You have servants there. But yeah, she eventually went around. She put on her cloak and galoshes and things like that because it was raining. She went out and she went and see him, and he was in his bath, soaking, trying to deal with his fever. And so she took care of him. She hung out with him. She read to him. She put him to bed, and then she fell asleep next to him. After listening to his woes and basically not allowing him to feel sorry for himself. How he was dying and everything. Yeah, basically just giving him some tough love. Just, I guess, softly or not so softly mocking him whenever he would complain about things. And I think this is, to be honest, this no-nonsense attitude about not caring exactly about how important he was, and treating him like just like anybody else, was probably one of the things he really liked about him. But so they both went to sleep, not knowing that these assassins are at this moment coming to the door. Now, these assassins are not terribly subtle people. They're not going to use a sniper's rifle. They're not going to use poison. They're going to batter down the door and kill everybody. This is a coup. So suddenly there's a huge commotion outside. People start yelling and shots start being fired, and things aren't sounding great. It's like the middle of the night, so whenever stuff like this happens, dogs barking, guns going off, it's not encouraging for people who aren't feeling well. So Manuela woke up Bolivar, and he goes and grabs some weapons to defend the door. And she says, basically, you're an idiot. Get dressed and don't panic. And so he sort of demurs and says, no, all right. And by the time he's dressed, the sounds of the assassins crashing through the palace are getting louder. Bolivar finds out he has no shoes because he'd sent them to be polished. And
sorry,
brilliant. I cannot deal with this coup because I can't find my shoes.
Running out barefoot.
Yeah.
Oh.
But Manuela is ready for any emergency, and so she gives him her galoshes that she had worn on the way over, and basically said, "Jump out the window." Now, this is
good job she's around, really, isn't it? Otherwise, how did this amazing revolutionary function without her to find his shoes and take care of him when he got a cold?
I will say that people, the hard-bitten cavalry of the plains, who they called the Llaneros, called him Iron Ass because he was so tough. But he was also at the same time the most delicate and confused guy you will probably ever read about as well. Who, when things go wrong, could absolutely lose it, or just rise to the challenge. And at this point, he's feeling ill, he's tired, and is just making all the wrong calls. And luckily, Manuela is there, like you say. He tells him to jump out of the window and run for it. So it is apparently an easy jump out of the window. I don't know which floor they're on, but he makes it to the ground and he runs off into the dark.
Not convinced she didn't have to push him.
Well, maybe she did, I don't know. She watched him disappear into the gloom, and by which time it's obvious that the assassins are at the door. Now, this is a problem, as you can imagine. She's just in the room now, and has no help, and everybody else is probably either arrested or dead or running away themselves trying to find help. So what does she do? She grabs a sword and goes to the door. She opens it and asks very politely what the matter is. And they go, "We want Bolivar." And she says, "He's not here. But I'll help you search for him." And so she guides them around the palace for a good deal of time, searching for him. And then they start to cotton on to the idea that, hey, maybe his mistress is leaving as a merry dance here. And she just outright tells them to their face, "I helped him escape, now you can kill me." And they do try. They beat her to the ground, they kick her, and they start hitting her with the flats of their swords, until one guy says, "This really isn't making us look very good. We did we really come here to kill women? And we're really supposed to be searching for Bolivar." And so they all run off to see if they can find him. That is what this is what she did when Bolivar was president. She saved his life. She became the Libertadora del Libertador. That is how she is best remembered. The woman, the beautiful woman in the doorway with the sword, standing between Bolivar and the assassins, who were rounded up in the next couple of days.
So he scurried off to exile, so he obviously wasn't that sick. But so what happens to her afterwards? Screw him, we're not really bothered about him.
Well, the thing is, because she was able to save him, he was able to get to loyal troops. And so this coup was immediately contained. And so he stayed in Bogota, and she stayed with him there. And she immediately went from the mocked and kind of, probably, hated for whatever reason mistress to a national hero, because Bolivar was so impressed with her and so grateful to her, probably after seeing her, and just, you put yourself in his place. He escaped with his life, and he didn't know if they were going to kill her or what. And then she appears, and then next time he sees her, that she's covered in bruises from having basically saved his life.
I just thought she probably just kicked the door open and went, "Well, that was shit."
Yeah, yeah. But you really have to do more, get better security guards, seriously.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. But it is true that his days in office were pretty much numbered after this, because he lost all kind of confidence in the fact that people wanted him to be president. And I believe he resigned. Within the next year or so, even though I think Manuela was a driving force in keeping him there until he just sort of packed up and left, because a coup is not a great thing to happen to a popular leader. It kind of demonstrates that the people aren't really with you, and I don't think he was able to win them back. So Manuela and he continue continue living together until he leaves for the last time. And he goes off, and I forget particularly what he goes off to do. I think he goes off to fight again, or tries to go off, or goes to try and gather support somewhere else. But I'm a little unclear as to that point. So I won't talk about too much in case I say something completely daft. So he went off to become a balloon salesman. That's what he did. Yeah, balloon salesman. But
as in like party balloons or hot air balloons?
Yes, of course. Yes, he went off to. I'm joking.
Oh, good. I was going to say no. I'd at least clarify that it was at least party balloons, because that's funny.
Yeah, he went. Yeah, exactly. He went off to sell those balloon animals.
Yeah, and then he dies in 1830, and that's the end of him. And everybody knows him. Everybody talks about him. So we're not going to talk about him. Let's stick with Manuela.
Yes, he went off and he died, and sadly, he didn't make provision for her in his will. No, obviously, he didn't know he was going to die. He died quite suddenly. But that is beside the point.
Still, what a knob!
Yes, it's very uncool. It's very uncool that he didn't make, because he knew he was a marked man. He knew he could technically die at any time, and he knew he was also quite sick. So he had so many issues regarding his romantic life that it's dubious, isn't it? It's not great. Now she stayed in Bogota and and a lot more shenanigans happened, because she became the target of all of his enemies because she stayed there, and she was fated not only to love him but believe in him, and so she became a pain in the backside to the new president of Bogota, and she trolled him. She became his troll. She said, "You're not." She kept just telling anybody who would listen, "You're not the president, but Bolivar is the president," and all such things like that. Every opportunity she got. This did not win her many friends. Only Bolivar's closest generals and things, and people like that, gave her actually sort of stayed by her and things like that. And she, there is a story of during the festival of Corpus Christi, large effigies being erected in the main plaza of her and Bolivar, with rather unflattering allusions written on them, and Manuela got her two loyal servants. These servants, by the way, I should say, are a little confusing to me, because I'm not actually clear if there's two of them or one of them, but and also it's unclear as to whether they or she was a slave or not. But there was a black woman or women who were really loyal to her and went everywhere with her and used to carry on in her games and outrageous tricks and things that she used to do. So she took these people down to the town square anyway, armed and dressed in military uniforms, and then calmly told them to tear the statues down, which they promptly tried to do and were arrested by the guards in the square. There followed a brawl outside of her house when people came to mock her, and one of her male servants ran out with a pistol and was immediately attacked when he tried to clear the crowd. So Manuela, watching from the balcony, said, "Well, there's a fight down there. Someone's fighting for me down there. I'm not just going to stay up here." So she grabbed a weapon, and her servant, and the famous servant also followed her, and they went out into the street and had a brawl, which had to be broken up by one of Bolivar's generals who had stayed in Bogota. This is the problem. This is kind of summing up her stay in Bogota after Bolivar left. when he died. Obviously, she didn't believe it at first, but it was true, and obviously she was now pretty much adrift. And it has to be said that whenever she was not immediately connected to him, or did not have him around to serve as a protector, because he let her get away with anything and could quite easily act as a shield whenever she got in over her head, she got into trouble when this was not around, because she couldn't put the brakes on. And this is obviously what happened here. She got exiled, and the rest of her life is really quite tragic, really, because not only did Bolivar not provide for her, when her husband died, she, for some legal reasons, I mean, probably because of the whole infidelity thing, did not get the inheritance that she should have got. And she ended up in a small town in northern Peru, where she made a living from selling tobacco and translating the love letters of Pacific whalers to their Spanish sweethearts.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
But I guess live fast, live by the
Yes.
sword, die by the sword.
Yeah. This is the thing. I mean, when you live that type of life, you are always in danger of the worst happening, or like the most dramatic worst happening. Like, you can lose everything or have everything. And Manuela, she never really settled for a middle ground. People were either her friends or her enemies. People were good or vile to her. And when she was there, she was so semi-celebrated. She's like the famous person who lives as a hermit in this out of the way place. That in the adventure novel, because she still ran into the odd person who I presume sought her out. She met Giuseppe Garibaldi and Herman Melville, author of Moby Dick, when she was in this little place in Peru. But that was where she ended up, and that's where she died. I believe in the diphtheria epidemic in the 1850s. And just to compound it all, nobody knows where she was buried, because she was buried in a mass grave. It was apparently that bad, this epidemic. And it was only recently that the government of, I believe it's Peru, or maybe it's Ecuador, one of the two, raised a monument to her, so that people would have a grave to visit if they so wanted to, because obviously, but even then there's no body associated with it. It's just sort of a honorary thing. And so that's where it ends.
Josh, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us about a part of history that Alex and I didn't know very much about. So thank you so much for plugging that gap for us.
My pleasure. I really, really enjoy talking about Manuela. She's one of my favorite characters from the South American Wars of Independence, and I hope people will go out and read more about it, because there's a lot more.
Highest honor here. She needs a Netflix series.
Yes, I think she is in some Netflix series already, but she doesn't have her own. So yeah, absolutely.
Join us on Monday when we will be with John Trigg looking at D-Day through German eyes. That's a fascinating discussion, so don't miss out on that one. Don't forget that we do exist on Patreon as History Hack, and on Patreon as well, which is Podbean's own version. Alina and I have had massive fun doing this in 2020, but life's going to change quite a lot next year, and we're going to actually have to go and earn a living, etc. If we want to keep up the regularity that we've been bringing you, and the kind of guests that we've been bringing you, and the workload, then we will need your help. So if you join, there's going to be incentives for joining on either of those platforms. We're revamping ourselves on both of them. So don't forget to go in. You can do as little as $1 a month, and it all goes towards keeping up History Hack as regular as we've been able to bring it to you this year. We are now on YouTube. We are posting all of our new episodes on there, and we have our own channel, and we are gradually posting all of the back episodes because we have been made aware of the fact that you can only find the last 100 on some platforms. So you can go and listen to your heart's content and laugh at the cartoons and have a great time. So do go over there and subscribe.